Hello, everyone. I am so excited about today's podcast because today's podcast features a really special, strong, and amazing lady and my personal hero, and that's my mother, Harriet Salarno. She's the founder and chair of Crime Victims United, that is the voice for public safety and for crime victims in California and, quite honestly, the nation. And my mom is the one, well, along with my father when he was alive, they brought this to the forefront. They brought California the victims' rights movement. And she's my hero. So I think you're all going to love her as much as I am. So everyone, this is my mother, Harriet Salarno.
Thank you.
So Mom, why don't you tell people why Crime Victims United? How did it come about?
It came about through Katina Rose was murdered on the University of Pacific, and that was my oldest daughter. And when that happened, it was like unbelievable this could ever happen on her first day of college. So it was my dear husband, my late husband, when we, as time went on shortly after the funeral and all, and he said, well, we need to get some help. Let's go into parents of murdered children and see about the grieving and doing, which I highly, highly recommend that. Parents of murdered children, they do offer a good support. And then we decided to move on and form our own group. At that time it was called Justice for Murder Victims, because we wanted to do more than just grieving. We felt so passionate, so strong about this should never happen to any family, and we need to get involved and find out what we can do to make changes in victims' rights. So
let me stop you right there when you say make changes. So obviously I went through the funeral as well. From the funeral, there was a trial for the murder of my sister. Growing up, we grew up in a very law enforcement, public safety family. My dad served as a commissioner for juvenile justice in San Francisco. My mom served on different commissions, all dedicated to public safety and community. But I think our entire family was a little shocked at the justice system back in 1979.
I'm glad you brought up. That was why we wanted to form our own group too, is that we saw the injustice starting with the courtroom, where you feel that all the rights are given to the perpetrator and we had no rights. For example, because you had to testify and we had to testify, the defense attorneys were very clever to put mom and dad on the last ones to testify, so we could not be in the courtroom for our other children. You particularly, because you were our youngest one, at that time only 12 years old, and you had to handle this all by yourself, and we could not be there to support you. And I remember the big reason why we wanted to do this was because when you ran out of the courtroom, let me back up, Nina. There was called a recess, that not a recess, where the judges, they confirm the lawyers to talk to the judges, and they go into his chamber, and they left you on the chair, and you were looking around, they told me, and everything, and then you could see the posters of your dead sister, and they left you there for quite a while, and we didn't even know that, and we were out there couldn't see. They even put paper on the windows where we couldn't even see into the courtroom. So when they finally returned, the defense attorney must have said so many questions about it that you got so emotionally upset and ran out of the courtroom into your daddy's arms and said, "Daddy, Daddy, why do they lie so much? You told me to tell the truth and everything would be fine. And you were sobbing, and I could remember the defense attorney saying, mistrial, declare a mistrial right there and then, but the judge did not. Well, there was more to this, but to bring it to a head, that was one of the reasons we wanted to form our group. We wanted to bring out, yes, we all grieve, all of us grieve, but we wanted to point out the injustice of the criminal justice system, what they do to the victims of violent crime. And that's why we started in San Francisco. We called it then Justice for Murdered Victims. And your dad, being very wise and knew politics, and said, we need to get involved in trying to make some changes and bring an awareness. And when I remember the very first bill that we passed was with Senator Quentin Kopp at that time from San Francisco, who went on to be a judge, that when the perpetrator gets out of prison, that he cannot move within 35 miles of the victim's residence. But that, I still wasn't satisfied. We wanted to do more. So your dad said, okay, let's get more political. And that's where I got Doris Tate from the Manson's case, the mother of Sharon Tate, who was actually spent 10 years, because she was ahead of me for 10 years, of her life in her bedroom. And I went to visit with her, and I said, we could be dynamite by going up to Sacramento, and maybe we can make changes. And then she said, okay, then we should get Dominic Dunn's mother. And so that was the movie star. And so we convinced her. And we thought, okay, we'll go to Sacramento. So we would go to Sacramento thinking, who's going to turn down 3 mothers who lost their daughters for murder? And were all 3 of us treated so badly in the courtroom. Oh, was that an awakening going into Sacramento. I tell you, and your dad did warn me it was going to be difficult. But he said, only you women can do it. This is something that women could change. So we went to Sacramento, and at that time, we ended up being good friends. That was at that time. This is history. Willie Brown was the Speaker of the House, and then John Burton was very into the Senate, and they were all from San Francisco, so I knew them. But they didn't treat us very well in those days at all. They did not treat us well. They would, for example, put us on the last on the agenda, and that would be going into the evening. And well, the press, everybody was gone who wanted to hear us. Or when we spoke, they would choose something in the microphone that nobody could hear us. Well, you know your mother. That upset me and angered me. And so I went home to Mike, and I said, this just angers me. Why are we treated badly? We lost our child. We were treated in the court system badly. And then we were treated in Sacramento badly. And then happened the very next day. There must be God Almighty. There's somebody up there. We got a letter that we were up for our first parole hearing. And we said, how can we? It was only 7 years later, and he was sentenced to life. How could we be called back in a parole hearing this early? What are they doing? Again, destroying us? He came up for his first parole hearing, I think it was 10 years after that. And so Daddy had said, well, let's turn this into a political arena. Our dining room was into a political arena, saying, let's ask for help. We'll send letters out. We did all to sign to, not for him to be released, to give us support. I have to say that, and the school was you were going to a private school. You were going to St. Stephen's, and your other sister was at Mercy, so that they were behind us. Yes, we will support you. This is wrong to bring you back. So we made such an impact that we even had
48 hours came in.
Well, we also had Shirley Temple come in and also offered to help us send letters out. So then that's when 48 hours. Do you remember 48 hours, Nina?
I do. 48 hours came and filmed. So that's what got the attention of the victims' rights movement.
Got the attention. You're right, Nina. Do you remember when you went on the bus and we went there?
And so from that is when you started to look at Crime Victims United in a broader vision, right? About starting to work at changing laws, because I think your experience, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, was that from the trial and the successive years, victims had no voice.
Absolutely.
They couldn't be heard at hearings. They couldn't be a part of the trial. And I remember soon after the trial, we testified in front of President Reagan's task force because the trial caught his attention about how we were treated, about that victims really had no place. I mean,
exactly
couldn't
right.
say anything, couldn't be a part of it.
Exactly. And in fact, victims never went to their parole hearings. They didn't even know. They hid that. But in doing our research, the law said victims can attend. So we wrote to the Board of Prison Terms. John Gillis was at that time, and he wrote and he sent us a letter. This is quite a change. You absolutely can change. You can go to the
so we got to be there, we got to speak, and I think that was kind of the first big task Crime Victims United got for victims, was to allow them to be heard when somebody was asking to be released from
statewide.
prison.
That was our biggest.
That was our first statewide.
Statewide. That was our first statewide. That was so big. In fact, it was so big that it not only brought 48 hours, it brought 2020 out. And remember, the reporters were all there. And I do have to say, at that time, the correctional peace officers in Sacramento, the president at that time was Don Novi, who came down personally to see that. And we also, being Italian, that the Italian community, the boys liked to barbecue and invited everybody over to barbecue.
But that's really where CVU was formed. At Vacaville State Prison.
At Vacaville State Prison.
We ended up partnering with the correctional peace officers and different public law enforcement agencies, public safety agencies.
I do have to say something about you, because when that was a whole big change, that's when really with Crime Victims United really was born, because Don Novi in Sacramento called us up to, he would like to meet with us. And so when we went up there and walked in to meet with them, and we introduced ourselves, and I introduced you, and you immediately said, "Why are you bringing my mother and dad up here? They've suffered enough. You don't need to bring them up there unless you're going to help them." You were just spoken, and he was so impressed with that. And then he said, "Well, that's why I am calling you up here. I do want to help your mom." And then that's when he turned around and he asked both Daddy and my mom and I, how can I help you? And Mike always said, "You ask her, because she's running with this." And I remember saying, and you backed it up, that I want to be as powerful as you at the state capitol. I want to get things done for victims' rights. he said, well, we will help you and we will support you. And that's when Crime Victims United started in 1980. The
1980, I think it was.
Was it 80? Oh, God. But I was going to say, no, she died in 79. 90. She died in 79, and it took me 10 years to get to this, what I really wanted as a goal. And in 1990, the CVU was founded, and in 1992, we were on the state capitol, and we had we had lobbyists, we had everything, and we were ready to go, and we did it. And we got very involved politically in all state propositions, as we still are today, Nina.
I was just going to say, so 1990 to now 2020, 30 years later, the accomplishments that you and Dad started are amazing. I mean, unfortunately, you've met many families whose lives have been disrupted from crime. Mark Klass, Mike Reynolds, just so many people that you and Dad then brought in to help make changes. So let's talk about some of the changes. The very first thing you did was the parole, but then you were the genesis behind CVU was the genesis behind Marcy's Law, which was the first constitutional amendment for victims' rights. Correct.
Correct.
You helped with Mark Klass with all the 3 strikes and 1 strikes law.
And that was Mike Reynolds.
Yes.
Mike Reynolds with the 3 strikes and 1 strike law.
And back in those days, we didn't have social media, so
no.
Talk about what you started on the Capitol once a year before we had all social media again. Word out to victims how we could help them. What did you do?
We had march on the Capitol on victims during Victims' Rights Week. And we could not have done this without the support of the correctional officers, because we didn't have that kind of money. And they would hire buses from all over the state and bring victims up to the state capitol. And we would have quite a ceremony. We would have dignitaries. And then we would give awards to the legislators that support it for public safety and helped us pass certain bills.
And didn't you also bring out all the services that were available?
Exactly. We had
resources.
Booths. Right.
And now we have a virtual resource clinic.
Yes, that's exactly right. We did victims comp. We brought everybody out to help them, and we would feed them and all, and then they'd take it on the bus and go back home. We did that for 22 years. Every day we had a march on, and we had good speakers that would come out from all over the country.
So let's talk a little. CVU's change laws daily. Some were big laws, like Marcy's Law. Some have been not so public. I mean, we're still there today. We still lobby every day. Right now we're working on different bills, but everything that we work on in the legislature has to do with preserving our communities and public safety, correct? And making our families safe.
Family and our communities safe. Both go hand in hand. And it saddens me to see what goes on now.
And I was just going to say, no offense, you've been around a little bit longer than me. So you've seen it from when the victims didn't have any voice, then got a voice, and we strengthened our communities and safety. Are you saddened by now? It seems like we're kind of swinging back and forgetting about the victims again.
Oh yes, this saddens me so much. And how we would have a little ups and downs in the 40 years that I've been involved, but nothing like today. And to me it's scary. It's very scary, because it's the good people that are not safe, that are not. And today, we feel the difference. We would have differences when I first started. Like I was saying, even with the legislature, with Willie Brown and all that, we would have differences, but we could talk and maybe win some, lose some. Today, you cannot talk, and people are fearful of speaking out, and that's what's so. I'm so sad.
You still come into this office every single day.
Yes.
It's your life. I think I'm going to speak for you, but it's your life dedication and to Katina and to what you went through. But in here, do you take calls still daily from victims and try to help them?
Absolutely. I will not refuse any victim, and I try to help them and everything. Absolutely.
And are you still active politically?
Oh, yes. We have.
In fact, it's a historic ballot. You'll see 2 signatures on 2 different propositions. So let's talk about the big Proposition 20. This has been in the making for 1.5 years now.
Oh, yes.
Let's talk a little bit about Proposition 20 and why it's so important to our California families.
Again, we speak of public safety. What's right, absolutely right, that serious felony crimes that are misdemeanors now,
So what we saw was this erosion of our public safety.
Yes.
Things like domestic violence, elder abuse, human trafficking of a child,
attempted murder,
rape of an unconscious person are no longer serious and violent felonies in California. And that's really, when we got together with our good group, McNally, Temple and Associates, and Assemblyman Jim Cooper, and law enforcement, we looked at all the victims that are, becoming more and more because of these downgrade, and so that's when we designed Proposition 20, right?
Right.
And it does not put more people in prison. It brings those felonies back up so we can have accountability and parole and things like that. So that's really our big push on the ballot this year. That's Proposition 20.
That's right.
And you're still out there every day talking about it and talking to people.
Oh yes, I mean, because this is so important, not for the children and safe schools. We need this. I mean, it's just mind-boggling that this is, we've come to this point that they don't consider this a serious crime, and yet our phone rings off the hook about serious domestic violence. I mean, attempted murder, child abuse. Oh my gosh. And, the things that come over, it's just heartbreaking.
So I'm going to shift gears because we do the political, but we also have a very charitable arm to Crime
Yes,
Victims United.
We do.
And I think that's very near and dear to you, the scholarship program.
That's very
It's named
dear.
for Katina.
That's
Katina
right.
Rose Memorial Scholarship. Why don't you tell everybody a little bit about that?
Well, I've always been, compassionate, particularly the children of violent crime that either lost their mother or their father. And there's no services to help them, They have to figure this out by themselves, It's not like if you're sick, you got a doctor or you got a support group. Children's victims don't have support groups. They don't have places to go to. And we tried so hard. And and then when they lose a parent, for them to go to higher education or to a trade school, they need help. And they need guidance. So we tried to form our foundation to work with children of violent crime. And the big thing is to try and give them a scholarship where they can go to college, university, or go to a trade school.
Well, because as we know, and through our own personal tragedy also it's a great adversity for especially a young person, whether it's they lost a parent or they themselves were a victim of a rape or a gang shooting, to overcome that emotional trauma.
Exactly.
So we award an annual scholarship every year to help assist with the cost, and we've been doing that I think for 30 years as well.
Right.
And then this year we're starting some more fun's the right word, we're starting some more service projects, such as we did the virtual clinic so that we can reach more victims.
Right.
She's getting used to the social media. you know. And then in our own little community and hoping to branch out, we're starting kits for first responders to give to victims on crimes. And so let's talk about, I mean, there's a lot of giving, and we do all the fundraising ourselves, right?
We do all.
That falls on her. That's her.
Oh, and it's a big job. Oh, I'd rather give than beg for money. You know, I just feel like
our usual fundraisers in a normal year, we have a dinner at Crime Victims' Rights Week, right? It's usually in April, and
in Sacramento.
All victims of crime. It's a nice dinner. We usually have really engaging speakers. I think next year we're going to have some Hollywood producers.
Right.
And then we started an annual rib cook-off, which has grown and seems to have a good time. 20 teams compete. With about 5,000 people come try ribs. We've done golf tournaments, all this stuff, but all the money that we raise goes back into California. And
oh, yes. That's all the money goes back. You know, that's absolutely right. It just saddened me because we're just still a small group, and it's a drop in the bucket. If everybody would just think and put their hand out to a victim of violent crime, particularly the children. I can't tell you how much that they need this support and the help.
Well, and this year is our 30th anniversary of 30 years of Crime Victims United, so we're actually doing a special funding drive. We're going to ask people to donate $30. That's all we're asking for
$30.
Just to donate $30 this year to Crime Victims United. We're going to do this drive in the fall, and all the money that's raised in that, again, we're just going to put back into these new programs, the victim kits, the victim comp specialists,
and support
groups, and helping our scholarship program, and really working hard to educate you, the public, on what's happening to keep your community safe.
I am convinced now that social media is going to bring us lots of money in that we can just go up and down the state, and that's my goal still.
So she loves this new social media, and I told you now, I'm sure you all fell in love with my mom. She is my hero. There's not many people that can survive a tragedy to begin with, but then make something of it and pass it down. I've been blessed to work side by side. Sometimes it's not always the easiest when my hair's not combed, she tells me. I work side by side with her every day, and now my daughter, so it's also very
I was
involved.
just going to bring this in. I do want to make this comment. I took my girls with me everywhere when I was doing this work. They would go to Sacramento. They knew more. They got more past for me than anyone else because the girls were all involved. They spoke in front of the President Reagan's task force, and they were superb. You know, so I said, we had a tragedy in our life, and we will never forget her, and we don't. But you need to know what we can do. So they were always involved. And when my granddaughter came over, we took her down there when she was only 3 months old and started from 3 months old all the way up. So I know that I'm in good hands because I have Nina will take over. But I plan to be around a long time yet. So and then I know that Lexi, when she finishes her education, will also be involved because she's already expressed it.
Well, and I think and thank you for sharing the genesis of Crime Victims United and how we're there, but I think it's really our goal to make victims survivors and to empower them so that we can continue to have that voice in
we
our
want
criminal
survivors,
justice system.
absolutely. So. Yeah.